but also what's available in this year's draft. So all the big people were out there working out at the Combine in Indianapolis, and Brian Nemhauser was there, known as Hawkblogger, of course. Brian, good morning. How are you?
Good morning, fellas. Welcome back to the Pacific Northwest.
Thank you. Yes, it's good to be here. What was the big takeaway from the big people? Let's start offensively. What did you make of the offensive lineman?
Man, I don't know if I've ever had more fun watching big offensive linemen do on-field drills than yesterday. I mean, that was some of those guys put on a show out there, and I think one of the big takeaways is that there are a lot of options for the Seahawks who really need interior offensive line, and there's a lot of depth there. So I think there's a few different combinations when you talk about free agency and then you talk about this draft class where I think the Seahawks offensive line could take a massive leap, just like Daniel Jeremiah said on your show, a while ago.
So what do you do? Is you look at those young guys and you allocate your resources. Do you allocate them to Drew Dahlman, the free agent center out of Atlanta, who's so well-versed in this system and can hit the ground running and maybe lead some of the other new pieces? Josh Myers, the center out of Green Bay, that obviously also is a pretty darn good run blocker. Or do you just say, no, we're going to take a couple of these difference makers maybe in the first 2, 3, 4 rounds?
Yeah, Brock, that was one of my big questions, and I've kind of been poking at Mike McDonald and John Schneider about this for a while. And so John Schneider spoke at the Combine on the podium, then we talked to him off to the side, and one of the questions I asked him was, hey, this is a young offensive line. How important is it to get some, experience in there versus just having a rookie get at it? And he says it's really important. And that combined with some of the things he said regarding, he didn't talk a lot about Olu Oluwatimi, that both he and Mike McDonald mentioned Jalen Sundell more than they mentioned Olu Oluwatimi. And so I'm putting 2 and 2 together. I think Drew Dahlman's their top free agent target. I think he's plan A, probably plan B as well. I think they're going to try to spend real money to get him. And I think if you get him, then you really have set up your draft to take whoever the best offensive lineman you want to take. Maybe not with your first pick, but maybe in the second round at 50 and still have a just significantly better offensive line. If you want to get really aggressive, you take Drew Dahlman in free agency and then you add a guy like maybe if you get lucky, Armand Membu comes in and can play guard for you. Maybe you get a Donovan Jackson. I think Will Campbell realistically could fall to the Seahawks at 18, and I think could be one of the best guards in football. I think there's a lot of really good options.
Is there one of those guys, and I know Gray Zabel's been another name that's been out there as well, is there one that when we get to April, you're going to be going, man, fall, please be there at number 18. This is the one that really will be a game changer for the Seahawks offensive line?
I mean, Armand Membu. This has been my guy from the beginning, and you're talking about a guy that's just massive. He's 332 pounds, and he broke 5 flat in the 40 yesterday. He moves, and you put him. He's so powerful. You watch his tape against Oklahoma. He is just planting guys. He's also a great guy. Has long arms. He's got the whole package. He can be one of the best right tackles in football. He can also be one of the best guards. And so the best thing there is, if you can get a guy that can be your starting guard, and in case something happens with Abe Lucas, you can have as good or maybe even a better right tackle. That's a best case scenario. I don't think that's going to happen. I think he's going to be a top 10 pick at this point. So outside of him, I think Will Campbell might be one of the best other options, at least in the first round. But there's a few guys that could be in that list for the second round that are pretty exciting as well. I think Gray Zabel, I have a little question about first round all the way to 18, but like Donovan Jackson, Tate Ratledge, Jonas Avenaya, these are guys that you could get potentially in the second round that would be day one starters.
Does it feel like Hawkblogger here with us? I tweeted this, a couple of weeks ago, just looking at some of the free agent lists, looking at some of this draft class through the Senior Bowl, and now we got the Combine, and here come the personal workouts. Does it feel like for the first time in some time that actually the market conditions and the available supply of big people actually line up with the Seahawk needs, maybe in ways they have not for a number of years?
In the draft, 100%. 100%. I think it was a little bit of a hit to the free agent class when Trey Smith, was tagged by the Chiefs. That's one less, great interior offensive lineman out there, and that's going to mean that's going to bump up the competition for some of these other guys. But, a name I don't know how much you guys have talked about that I've warmed to is Will Fries, who's, I think a really good fit for this kind of zone blocking offense.
He's the guard he's the guard from Indy, right? They got banged up last year. Yeah. Yep.
And he's young. He's 26. Tevin Jenkins is a really good player, although he's hurt quite a bit. Mekhi Becton's a guy that everyone loves because of his size. He had pretty good success in zone blocking last year, but it's still a little hard to imagine 370 pounds, beating guys off the ball and getting to the outside shoulder. So, but he's obviously really talented. So there's some interesting names for sure. And then just in the draft, guys, it's amazing. We haven't even talked about center Jared Wilson from Georgia. Had an unbelievable day yesterday. He ends up running 4.8, 4.40 at over 300 pounds and was the third-ranked zone blocking center in football last year. So he had an outstanding day.
Was this your first time covering it in this capacity over the length of the whole thing?
It was. I didn't really know what to expect. I thought I might be bored, but 100+ interviews later, it's like an NFL convention there. Have you guys ever gone?
I have not, other than when I was in it myself, no, but I've watched a lot of it. And it just struck me yesterday as well, and Hawkblogger here with us, just how unique. I think all the old linemen in one group all got together, prayed before Daniel Jeremiah tweeted that out. I always find it so compelling how different personalities show up by position. Like you watch him work out and train, and you just can that's the beauty of this game. They're just so unique by position group. And I don't remember, maybe I'm prisoner of the moment, but I just don't remember an O-line group that is quite like this one for a league that is going to really, really need them this year.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think part of what you're talking to there, Brock, as well is it's not just, obviously you want them to be talented and athletic and all those things, but who are they? Like, if you look at the Seahawks offensive line room, there's some real talent in there. Charles Cross is extremely talented. Abe Lucas is very talented. You've got some guys with high-end talent. A lot of them are pretty soft-spoken or quiet. I don't know who's going to be the real, voice in that room sometimes.
Yep.
And I look at Donovan Jackson, at Ohio State. This guy would come in and be a leader day one. You look at Armand Membu. He would be same kind of guy. Will Campbell, oh, my gosh. Talk about the makeup on this guy. He's so competitive. So I think Tate Ratledge is an amazing personality. Jared Wilson, I don't know if you heard, he's his teammate, talked about wanting to smell his mullet. So that was an adventure. But yeah, these guys are great guys to add to the room, not just great players.
What about for those of us that still, as much as they want offensive line help, what about those of us who still want to make sure that the defensive line gets better? What did you see for the big people on the other side of the ball?
Yeah, Kenneth Grant's the name that obviously Daniel Jeremiah had linked and a couple people have been talked about. He did not have the best workouts. He especially disappointed on the bench, I think, and so he didn't have quite the blowout that I think most people expected. Shamar Stewart was the guy that just had an outstanding workout, and he put up numbers at his size that are essentially equivalent to Myles Garrett. Now, I don't think he's Myles Garrett. I don't think anybody thinks he's Myles Garrett, but just to give you an idea of the kind of athlete you're talking about at that spot. When I talked to you guys at the Senior Bowl, that was the guy I said he just he moved differently than everybody else. So he's certainly an option. But if you want to talk about the guy that jumped out, that had the best combine probably of anybody, it's the safety from South Carolina, Nick Emmanwori. And this guy, I talked to him, was coached by Cam Chancellor's former coach. He compared the two, 220 pounds, 225 pounds, running a 4.3, 840. Just unreal athlete. And I think, I don't think it's unrealistic that he could be, if you're looking for the blue chip, the best player available, if he falls to you at 18, they might have to go that direction, which is not the trenches.
So let's kind of build beyond just what you saw out on the field and maybe a little bit more into what you heard. As you talked to other members of the media, other people that you just were chatting with there, What were the conversations about the Seahawks like?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the big conversations, and I think the clarity from at least from John Schneider and Mike Macdonald, and then I'll talk about some of the other folks as well, but was they know that they can't, just because the offensive line is their clear need, they cannot just focus on offensive line at pick 18 in the first round. They're going to have to focus on getting the best player available, and I think that opens up a lot of possible options. I think that also really puts a focus on free agency. If you follow John Schneider's moves for the last, forever, really, since he's been here, he will try to do in free agency as much as possible so he can enter the draft without having a glaring need, so they can really just let the board speak to them. I think that's going to be the case here. I think the other thing that's going to be the case is I think the Seahawks really do want to draft a quarterback. And the things that I'm hearing are, one, I mean, they met with Jackson Dart, so I know that meeting happened. And I think now they did not meet with Quinn Ewers, at least officially, but there's some conversation that they're interested or they think that he's worth looking at. I think the other name at quarterback, just to keep an eye on, that I think I've mentioned to you guys before, is Tyler Shuck. He's a little bit older, but outside of that, he had the best combine of the quarterbacks and looks, I think, the most pro-ready of the quarterbacks that worked out. On the other side, Shedeur Sanders, I'm not sure he's going to be a first-round pick at the end of the day. I think there's some teams that have real questions about him.
Excuse me?
Was that Ron Rivera who did that? I think it was.
It was.
Rewind that back. What did you just say?
The conversations around Shedeur Sanders are not good. I think a lot of folks have real question about his makeup, about his tape. And when you look at him compared to the other quarterbacks in this class that are after Cam Ward, I think everyone sees it as Cam Ward alone in his own class, and then a big gap. And then I think Shedeur Sanders is in the scrum with the other guys, with Jackson Dart, with maybe even Tyler Shuck, with some of these other players. So I think there's a chance. The multiple people I talk to definitely think he's going to be in the 20s if he's drafted in the first round, and a few people think that he might not make it to the first round at all.
Wow. What's going on with DK Metcalf?
I don't think anything's gone on with DK Metcalf. Look, I think you guys, we've talked about it. I mean, Mike, you've talked about it for a while. I've talked about it all the way back when Russell.
I'm sorry, Mike has?
I've been on it for a little while.
I know,
you guys
right?
been talking about it a while?
I think it makes sense that you would talk about it. I don't think if you listen to the Seahawks and you can interpret properly, the big conversation for how they hire their offensive coordinator was evaluating how that person was going to use DK Metcalf and accentuate DK Metcalf. Mike Macdonald talks about him as the centerpiece of the offense. He talks differently about DK Metcalf than almost any other player on that roster outside of maybe Devin Witherspoon. And so, yes, as I talked to you guys the last time, there are not many good wide receivers in free agency. I don't think there's very many good wide receivers in the draft. And there's a lot of young quarterbacks that need targets, so of course teams are going to call about DK Metcalf. But I don't think the Seahawks have any intention of moving him. I think he's going to get extended. I think he's going to be here. And so I don't think there's much news on that front.
So would you do DK for a pick in the 20s and a downgraded wide receiver who could still start for you?
Oh, would I? I think DK Metcalf for me is someone I'd rather be looking at, a 1 and then a little bit like a 3 or a 4, like an A.J. Brown style trade. And I think that is a fair thing to ask for in this particular draft because of what I just mentioned. I just don't think I just don't think the Seahawks are going to do it. So yeah, I personally, yes, I would entertain that. And I think that the Seahawks might be best set up by doing it. But I don't think the Seahawks are going to look at that too.
Well, here's what I think is going to happen today, tomorrow, this week, like a sense of urgency with the new league year right around the corner. I think Roy Robertson Harris is going to get released and Jenkins is going to get released and eventually Tyler at some point this week is going to get released. And there's going to be a lot more cap space available. Do you expect, and this is where I don't know, I'm confident in that, I don't know, but I'm hoping a Geno deal gets done this week so then the rest of the dominoes can fall. What was the momentum and the feeling about an extension with Geno over the course of the weekend?
Yeah, I mean, this is the one of the biggest learnings for me about the Combine is the actual workouts are like the least of the focus there. It is about front office people meeting with other front office people and meeting with agents. And John Schneider had his meeting with Geno Smith's agent last week to find out for really the first time, quote, the first time, what Geno's agents and representation believe his market should be and what his price should be. And the expectation should be that this is the week, ahead of free agency, that kind of deal gets done. It was, I think, March 6th was when he signed his free agent deal last time, ahead of when the league year opened. I think you should expect it to happen this week. I think John Schneider, Mike Macdonald, everybody has indicated that they want that to happen. And so it's just a matter of what that number is. And I think that it's a huge, huge piece of the puzzle for the Seahawks in terms of creating the cap space they need to actually go out and get a guy like Drew Dahlman. So I think it happens. And yeah, I think like you said, I think a lot of these other guys are going to be off the team or off the roster as well.
What is the number at which you would say, sorry, we're just not doing that?
It's less for me about the number. It's more for me about the length of time and guarantees. So I think anything that allows you to get, have Geno for the next 2 years and then, be able to move on, I think is a fine deal to have. So whether, people are going to, maybe jump out at 40 million or 45 and like they're going to say Geno Smith isn't worth that. I think first of all, he is worth that relative to the quarterback market. Second of all, like you're still building your roster. So as long as you're in a situation where you can get out of this contract in a couple of years, I don't think there's a number that really hamstrings you because you're going to be able to prorate the signing bonus and move a lot of the cap space out into future years or the cap hit into future years. So that's the way I'd look at it.
100 interviews? Did I hear you say that earlier? 100 interviews?
Yeah, over 100. I got them all posted on our YouTube channel and up at patreon.com/Hawkblogger. So met with so many guys. Got a chance
like
to
one-on-one interviews? Like, was that in a scrum or 100 like one-on-one?
It's a mix. Most of them are scrum interviews, but yes, a lot of great conversations.
Wow. I thought TJ and Lyle were busy down there last week in spring training, Salk.
No.
That's a lot.
They're mostly just sitting on their butt. I didn't see them doing all that much. I certainly didn't do 100 interviews. Jeez. I'm just kidding. While you were interviewing and chatting with all those people, what was the talk in the Combine in general in Indy about Myles Garrett? Where do you think that story ends up going?
It's a really great question, but in the sense that it should have been a conversation point, but there wasn't a lot of discussion about it. Like, I think the assumption is that, he clearly wants to be moved. Now, whether the Browns can find a deal that they're willing to do is another story entirely. So I did talk to someone from Cleveland about that, in particular, a reporter that covers the team, and they're expecting the move to happen, but they'd expect it to happen a lot closer to the draft, and maybe even happen after the draft. But, there wasn't a lot of buzz relative to Myles Garrett, and I think that teams are probably waiting to see what happens in free agency to decide whether or not they're going to put together a really large package for what is maybe the best defensive player in the league.
Yeah, I'm going to keep watching that one. I don't know whether he ends up here, and that may just be an impossibility, but you end up with, the part of my reasoning on the DK Metcalf thing is, what does it look like if you trade DK and you get back a second number one, and that gives you a lot of flexibility to do what you want to do. You can use both of those picks on, one offense, one defensive lineman. You can trade one of those picks. You can try to trade into next year's draft a whole lot more easily if you're looking to get a quarterback next year. And if you want to use some of that capital to go get someone like Myles Garrett and still have, something left to help your offensive line, gives you the opportunity to do so. So I'm watching that one. I'm watching DK, and we'll see where this all goes over the next few days. As you said, all of your various 100 interviews and everything else that you did at the Combine, all available. Give us the details again one more time.
YouTube.com/Hawkblogger.
There you go. Best place to go. Thanks, buddy. We appreciate it. Great work, and we'll talk again.
All right. Thanks, guys. Have a good one. All right.